everybody, and welcome to this episode of Writing the Rapids. It's a little weird because I'm talking to people primarily about their editing work. This is sort of a pilot episode for an idea that I want to call Great Gates, which is basically Writing the Rapids, but for editors rather than writers. So if you like this episode, you can let me know on Twitter at noisemakerjoe. You can email me, noisemakerjoe@gmail.com. You can support me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/noisemakerjoe, where you'll get things like podcast episodes early, flash fiction that nobody else gets, and more. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Surfaces.cx is an open literary arts platform acutely oriented toward works of spontaneous creation by self-taught artists working outside of existing literary communities and the academic system. Surfaces.cx is interested in writers working to cultivate new literary terrain. We are seeking pieces exploring the textures of dislocation, technology, burnout, and pain. To locate this material, we source content from individuals currently writing, but also, and most essentially, the public at large. And with me, I have the two editors of Surfaces. Please introduce yourselves in whatever order seems appropriate.
Mika first.
Okay. I'm very awkward with podcasts. I apologize.
Podcasts are inherently awkward.
They really are. Anyway, my name's Mika. I'm an editor of Surfaces, and I tweet at Tokyo_vamp, and I work here with Anthony.
Yeah, I'm Anthony Dragonetti. I'm the other half of this dynamic duo. Also a writer. And we're celebrating a year of Surfaces.
Oh, well, that's serendipitous. I didn't even know about that. When did it start exactly?
It's a year tomorrow.
Nice. Tomorrow as we record?
Yeah, so the 14th.
Okay. Man, it seems like I've been aware of your Twitter before that, but maybe time just moves in strange ways now. So what was the sort of... I don't want to say impetus because I use that word too much, but why did you start Surfaces?
Well, that's a kind of a complicated question, actually, because we're not the people who started it. We didn't found it. We weren't involved with it when it first started. We took over around in July, completely. And before that, we became editors in May of last year, and then ran it with the founder until about July, when he decided he wanted to exit and just leave. And from then on, it's been our project. But we've been kind of closely tied to it for a long time, like talking to the editor and stuff, like since, well, at least for me, since like late March or so, which is kind of how I ended up getting offered the position in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, when the site came out last February, I was just a big fan. That's really all it was. I just loved the site. I loved the aesthetic. I loved the pieces that they were running. And I was just like a big cheerleader for it. And I was just tweeting about it a lot. And, the original editor just kind of reached out to me and was like, hey, I think I'm going to need some help running this. I can't do it alone. So I was thrilled to get that call. And then I think Mika and I got brought on at the same time.
Yep. And I think it's one of those things where we were brought on, I think, because like we kind of shared like that original like vision that the founder wanted to put into literature and stuff. Like he seemed to trust us beyond any others, like to, I guess, that we were all like on the same page on what we wanted out of the site and such. Which is why he eventually did just leave it to us and decided we could, do whatever with it instead of just shuttering the project entirely.
Okay. I dig it. As does Sherlock the dog, who's barking in approval. So, and I read from the submission page, but sort of, if you want to expound on, for someone who's never even been to the website, who's never come across the Twitter account, what is Surfaces beyond being a literary website, magazine, journal thing?
What is it beyond a lit site? I mean, I think it's also kind of like a focal point. I mean, we kind of just deal in publishing lit, but I think it's also kind of just like a community has kind of sprung up around it. And I don't mean Surfaces, just Surfaces alone. I mean, there's a few sites that I think kind of share our approach to literature. So I think it's also just kind of like a spot where, people know what they're going to get. They look forward to reading it. And it's just a kind of like a community building site also. And it kind of just, shows the potential, I think, of what writing could be in 2020 and beyond. Because I think we take a pretty unorthodox approach, to the kinds of things that we publish.
There's and also I think there's just a vibe to the way we run things that I think is pretty different from a lot of, I guess, more quote unquote institutional places, because I've expressed before, on the site or on the Twitter, I mean, and also with the submission page and stuff that we don't have any interest in cover letters or bios and stuff. We don't have any interest in MFAs. It's just not a concern for us. What we care about is good writing. That's what we're here for, is to make really good writing that feels new and exciting and is outside of the university system and such.
I kind of came into this scene around mid-late 2017, and it seems like in that time there's been a handful of sites that have sort of grabbed at that idea as well. And when did the two of you get into writing seriously for an internet audience?
For me, it's really only been maybe a little bit more than a year now. I'm pretty new to this, honestly. I kind of just came in guns blazing and got lucky. So, I've only been here for a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, same here. In a sense, my history with online literature is kind of complicated because I was pretty involved in it back when I was a teenager and alt lit was still a thing. Okay. Tao Lin and Steve Rogenbuck and all of that. I was a huge Steve Rogenbuck fan at the time. And then everything that happened with alt lit and its whole scene just kind of dissolving happened. And then I just kind of took I don't know what you call it. I just kind of isolated myself from literature, from online literature at least, on purpose, and just stopped interacting with other writers. I stopped talking to them or reading their stuff. I just kind of started doing my own thing until very early last year when I, on a whim, submitted to Soft Cartel. And then it kind of just went from there. And suddenly I was getting all of this attention and didn't really know what to do with it because it was so weird and new to me. Because I had kind of convinced myself at a point that nobody's going to read this. Nobody cares about what I'm doing. I'm just going to do it because I can. And then I became the editor of a literature magazine. So
it does seem like there is not as much of a cult of personality these days. It seems very decentralized when it comes to writing. I mean, everybody is into Sam Pink, and there's a couple people who are, kind of everybody's read, everybody knows. But it does seem more decentralized.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, you're definitely going to have your Sam Pinks, your Blake Butlers, and people like that. But I think at the level we're working. I think it's inevitable that you get decentralized just because I think there is we don't have a lot of small indie book publishers. at least like kind of catering to the kind of audience that we do. So it's kind of hard to kind of get those like big names. Like, if you're familiar with like Lazy Fascist, yeah, I mean, like I loved Lazy Fascist, and they're the ones that introduced me to like all those people, Sean Kilpatrick, Noah Cicero, like all those guys. And, like in the absence of something like that, I think it's hard to like kind of develop that cult of personality.
Yeah, I think so. And a lot of the names that we've mentioned are sort of holdovers, the people from that alt-lit who turned out not to be sexual predators or whatever.
They either didn't turn out to be sexual predators or didn't become like huge mainstream names like Roxanne Gay and stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, she's making a living.
I've read like none of it, but also whenever I go back to like old alt-lit stuff or like HTML Giant and stuff that isn't like Taolin or Heiko Julian or whatever, which kind of sucks that it's the sexual predators that like I like reading still. But whenever I read a lot of alt-lit stuff, like, and especially my own, I just like, I can't stand it. It's terrible. Some of it is so bad.
Yeah, I think one of the terms I heard with regard to it was like Kmart minimalism, which I think makes sense. Well, and that's one of the issues that I see today, at least for me, because I like to categorize things, is there's not like genre type names. Like with internet music, you got your Witch House and your Ocean Grunge and Vaporwave and Mallsoft and all these things that are like just barely different from something else. But there's at least a name for it, and there's sort of deviations. And with writing, it's very fluid, where I can be reading something on Surfaces and then find my way over to something on Inside the Castle and then something somewhere else, and they're different in structure and tone a little bit, and it all feels the same, but it all feels very different. And it's maybe that's why it's so decentralized too, that there's not sort of partitions set up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly true. Like I don't, no one really uses like genre names when describing any of this stuff. Like even on Surfaces, I mean, we don't subscribe to just like one type of writing. We're kind of all over the place. And like, I don't think I could like even pinpoint the genres that we publish.
Oh yeah. Like we have so many different like things coming in, like, I mean, so the bio says like neo-decadent computer writing on the Twitter.
Yeah.
And that's, I didn't even know until recently that that's an actual thing, and like, it's one of those things where it's like such a micro scene, like that almost nobody would even know what it is or recognize it if they saw it. And even then, like, I read through the manifestos for it, and it's not even something I agree with entirely. So I'm kind of glad that people see the site as not really having a genre and kind of having more of just a vibe or like aesthetic to it. Because we have like collage work on there. We have people who've sent us in like just nonfiction essays. And like poetry, prose, basically everything. Like I even got someone to send in, I haven't looked at it yet, but I got someone to send in a comic that they made.
Ooh.
Because to me, like the part of why I find literature so exciting is that like you said, like it's more fluid. It can really like develop like from multiple different angles rather than being relegated to like one local like scene that goes to the same bar or whatever and plays the same punk music, etc.
Yeah. And I think about like post-war expressionism with painting, right? And like all these dudes are like at the bar together smoking and drinking and then going home and throwing paint at a canvas. And I don't know, like the Wild West of the internet now more than ever seems to be making it harder to figure out what's going on. So in that vein, how do the two of you decide what to post on the website?
It's like my personal criteria is so I don't even have really any. It's one of these things where it's like I will read a piece and I kind of just innately know whether or not it would be a good fit. I don't really have a list of things that has to check off or anything. It's just this thing where I read something, and if it feels good to read and it is written well and I like it and it fits what I feel like is the general direction of the website, then I want to take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should probably kill the mystique of editing right now and say that, if we reject something, it doesn't mean it's bad. It literally just means that we didn't feel like it fit the vibe. Sure. I mean, it's that simple. It's that simple. I mean, when I'm reading stuff for Surfaces, I'm reading it does this feel like it fits the mood of the site, which I think, we're kind of interested in these ideas of alienation and atomization and it is computer writing at the end of the day. And also visually striking, the Surfaces is really, I think, about the aesthetics above all. So, when we consider what we want to run on the site, it really just is does this feel like Surfaces to me, yes or no? And that's really what goes into making the decisions.
Do you find that the two of you are on the same wavelength most of the time?
I'd say so. I mean, whenever we send are just basically what we want to take or not to each other. Usually there's at most one or two we would disagree on. That's pretty much it. And then I tend to be more unsure of whether we should take something than Anthony usually is. So usually I just kind of defer to him with that, but otherwise we don't really disagree a whole lot. I think we both have a good sense of where we're going with the website.
Yeah, I mean, when you have a 2-person operation, there's no split vote or anything. Either it's 100% or not. So I can probably count on one hand when I've really disagreed with Mika. And even then, it's not even that big of a deal. It's I was slightly more positive about it, or slightly more negative about it. And then we just decide to run it or not. But, I don't think, we're really far apart at all. At this point, Surfaces feels like an extension of the both of us.
I like that. That feels good. What's the ratio of submissions you get to things you publish?
I mean, I get the sense, I don't really keep a running count, but I get the sense we reject a decent amount more than we accept. Do you think that's true, Mika?
Yeah, I would say I don't have any percentages or anything like that, but I would say it's probably at least a 70-30 split, reject and accept, probably. There's some times where because we kind of do it in batches where we're okay, this week we're going to read all the submissions we got up until now, and then respond to all of them. And I don't know, sometimes there's we accept half of what we got. Sometimes we accept only a few things. It really just depends, but I would say it's probably 70-30, 60-40 type split. We tend to get a lot of really good stuff though, because I think people just have a good sense of what the site's doing and what would fit. We really rarely get just some random person from an MFA program or whatever submitting to us because we just happen to be a literature magazine. That has happened a couple times where people have definitely not read the site, but it doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, we definitely get the occasional blind submission where it's you'll get a cover letter with all these credentials and stuff, and then we just eliminate them with extreme prejudice.
There's plenty of places for those people too. What's your reading like? Do you read a lot of other online lit stuff, or is it lots of books? Do you feel like you should be or have to read a lot of other online lit stuff?
I personally read books mostly. I just love reading a book, holding a book. And I also review them. So like that also kind of like, sways me. But as far as like reading online, like I used to read more widely, but like at this point, I'm reading like the small circle of sites that, I feel like, kind of do something similar to what we're doing. And, I prefer to just like read those as a fan rather than, constantly kind of like reading all these sites looking for like the next big thing.
For me, like personally, I read a little bit of everything. Like I do read a ton when it comes to like online literature, because like I have people always sending me stuff even if they don't contribute. Like I have just friends that are writers that will send me stuff constantly. And then I read some books, but like I tend not to read tons of indie literature or novels and stuff. Like right now, like my current binge is I've just been reading a lot of theory and like paranormal stuff. Like that's basically all I've been reading when it comes to actual books. I've always been a big advocate that for the idea that like you should look for your like aesthetic influences and stuff outside of just your little circle, or outside of just other writers, or especially what's like big and mainstream. Like when I was writing on my own without interacting with other writers for that like 4 or so years, my style kind of developed into what it is now. And I wasn't really reading other people. I was taking influence from like music and movies. Like that was my big thing. Like I wasn't really reading anything. I was just watching lots of movies and listening to lots of hip hop. That's it. And I think that it's understated how effective that like other mediums can be for your writing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I at least from like my own writing too, like, I definitely get influence from like other writers and stuff. But, when I'm actually doing the work, I'm usually pulling like from the mood that like the music puts me in, or movies or whatever. So I think Surfaces kind of reflects that we're very much interested, like, in the visual component and just like kind of like the overall mood.
As far as like the sort of like circle of magazines and writers that are doing similar things, like I wonder if there's a way to map it for somebody who's like just realizing that online literature is a thing.
It's, I don't know, like if there's a way to really do it without like an ungodly amount of like manpower or man hours, I mean, at least, because like, and just sheer like time and labor, because the just online community in general has so many weird connections going on in it, and like people who know each other like through mutual connections and stuff is so vast. Like for example, like Surfaces isn't really connected to this place like super closely or anything, but I do have talked to the editors before and like really love their work, but they're kind of also outside of like our little circle. I'm a huge fan of a literature mag called Homintern, which does like communism, like communist writing and stuff like that, and a lot of like translations and stuff. And so thinking about like that and how like distant that connection is, and how like it's connected but it's not, like I just feel like it would be almost impossible to really like get a good picture without just of like how things are connected and how they relate to each other without just immersing in it for months.
Yeah. I definitely feel lost all the time, and like I make a concerted effort to find people to talk to in public. So yeah, it's tough.
Oh, well, and another thing too I just thought about is like the fact that there are websites that are doing like something completely outside of what Surfaces is going for, that you could say we're connected to just because like we know like the editor or whatever, like Back Patio Press and Philosophical Idiot, like know the editors really well, but also like wouldn't say, despite reading them a lot, wouldn't say that they're like aesthetically on the same wavelength as Surfaces. There's a lot of stuff like that too, where it's like, even there's so many connections, even where like the apparent aesthetic or mood relations isn't apparent, or there isn't any. Like everyone just knows each other.
Yeah, there's that. There's like the whole, like, you know, it's like, I don't know if you could put a number on it, but like, let's just say, like, let's just throw the number of 200. Like, it's just 200 people that all know each other. And, you know, you can kind of like make the web from there. But I think the Surfaces difference is that, I mean, just the sense that I get is that a lot of lit mags, I think, are exclusively read by writers. It's just writers reading lit mags in the hope to get into them. Whereas I think with Surfaces, I think we reach a lot of people who aren't writers and have no interest in being writers. They just think it's cool.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like just a few days ago, I was having people that don't write, they don't engage with any other literature magazines or anything, but they are like intensely interested in what's going on at Surfaces. And I think that's honestly some of the best like comments I can receive, is people who don't read like period or don't read literature magazines or whatever being interested in what we're doing. And I think it's a sign that we're succeeding in what we're trying to go for.
And it just kind of occurred to me as we were talking that I was trying to figure out how to ask about standing out from all of the other 4 trillion online indie lit mags that are out there. And I think what it comes down to is that it's just nice to have a website that you can go to for that website. So what I'm getting at is, like, you go to Reddit and it's like, you know, every website kind of compressed into one thing. And Surfaces or, you know, Back Patio Press or whatever, is like you go there and you kind of feel like you're just in that space.
Yeah, you know, I think that's kind of something that's getting lost with time. And this gets said a lot, but like, you know, the internet used to be 1 million sites and now it's what, 4, you know? So like, you know, we're constantly like on like a huge social media platform, whether it's Reddit or Twitter or whatever. And then you kind of just like follow links from there maybe. But, you know, like what we're going for with Surfaces is like, you know, you go there directly and you know what you're going to get. And, you know, you're going to see just like one piece to focus on. And you could scroll down and read them in order or whatever. But it's like it's almost like an oasis, I feel like.
Oh yeah. Before I felt the most strongly, but like before I took like the editor position, and when I first submitted to Surfaces, I submitted a piece called Trans Deflagration, that was 2 poems I wrote like immediately after I just spent like, I don't know, like it was hours just reading everything that was up on the website at the time. And I kind of like missed that, where like you could just go to one website that's just off in the corner and just get absorbed in it for hours. And I think that it helps. I think Surfaces is helped by its like more minimalist design and the fact that we do a couple of things that a lot of places don't when it comes to promoting our pieces and just presenting them. Like a lot of places do the header art or whatever. Like they have like a header picture of some kind. Like Soft Cartel had that and stuff, but it was always just like a stock photo or whatever. With Surfaces, I make some kind of like header art myself somehow, usually with Photoshop for each piece. And we do these things that we kind of internally call ad lines, where whenever we promote a piece on social media, I basically write a little like poem of some kind, just a little description or like a little bit of prose that describes the mood of the piece in some way or another. And I think that kind of helps us stand out a bit or get people excited for it when they otherwise wouldn't.
Yeah, so that was the next thing I wanted to get into talking about is in this world where there's 1.5 billion lit megs, was asking what are some of the things you do to try to get people to read, and that's really interesting. I really like the Twitter account too. I was scrolling down it today while I was at work, and just some of the retweets are strange. A lot of the images are odd, but it kind of telegraphs what is going on pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to having a defined aesthetic. And even like, I mean, the Twitter like sticks pretty close to that. You know, we just have a mood that we're going for. And I think like if you have an established vision in place for like what it is you want to put out, then it kind of just naturally happens. You know, I think there are some lit sites, you know, that kind of style themselves after like big publications. So they'll have like multiple sections, you know, the layout of the homepage, you have like 5 featured pieces all over the place. And like, you know, like with Surfaces, I think we just want to like cut all that out and like you just direct people's attention to the one featured piece for the day.
With the Twitter account too, I kind of see that like I've started to see it as like this thing where it's like, okay, I can tell people just fine like what I kind of look for in a piece and stuff, like the types of moods I like and stylistic things I like, etc. But the Twitter account's one of those things where I kind of feel like I can establish like a continuous feed of aesthetics that I find compelling and think would fit the site in some way, like even tangentially. So like I'm always just retweeting stuff that like if someone was to write me something that had the same mood of whatever I retweeted or posted, I'd probably be willing to take it. I probably want to take it. And along with that too, like there's really nothing better than like just reading the site itself if you want to like submit something. And that's basically my first advice for anyone that submits is just read the site, read like this and this piece and go from there. But anyway, going back to the Twitter, like there's a couple of other like accounts that I retweet pretty frequently from. Because I feel like there's something, I don't even know how to describe it, but there's something going on, especially in like a lot of the like darker communist like Twitter accounts, like aesthetically are just posting things and saying things that like you're not getting anywhere else. And I find that really, really compelling. And it's something that I've been trying to like, I guess, promote or like draw attention to.
Yeah, there's like the weird doomer leftist glitch art surrealist pseudo ARG sort of like it's very hard to describe. I guess that's what's so compelling about it, right? Like if you can describe it in 2 words, then it's harder to make it compelling.
Yeah, like I said on the Twitter account a couple of days ago, actually, I am obsessed with aesthetics that I'm incapable of describing.
So where do we go from here? We've spent about half an hour sort of describing what it is, but what's the trajectory?
That's a good question. I mean, you know, I don't. I mean, I think for now, I think we're happy to kind of just keep doing what we're doing. You know, as we're kind of like expanding our reach, people are interested in sending types of things that we haven't published before, like the comic that was mentioned before. So I think it's really a matter of like seeing how far we can kind of stretch what we're willing to run on the site and see how that feels. But as far as like monetization or books or anything, I don't see that on the horizon for us, at least anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't see us doing books or anything like that, or like basically becoming a press like anytime soon. Just because that's something that I think is, I don't know how I'd say it, just like a bit more like involved and like really serious in a way that I kind of just I'm not comfortable taking the site that far yet. Because one, just because like I think you need to be able to dedicate a ton of time to do that kind of thing, but also I think that right now our focus is on like the unknowns, the like people that don't submit anywhere, or like the person who submit that comic like just aren't even part of like the literature scene at all. And I think being a press can kind of mess with that a bit. I mean, Expat's great. I love Expat, but like I think right now like it helps with the vibe of the site to just kind of be all about online literature that is posted on the website and kind of exists in this weird online space rather than bringing it into the real world yet. There is one thing we've kind of talked about doing a couple of times, and I did with my latest zine, but it kind of in a small way, doing like online zines of sorts, like distributing online zines somehow. I'm pretty interested in that idea. So like if someone wanted to submit like a whole zine to us, we would like host it on the website and stuff, and you'd be able to read it there, download it there, etc. Haven't really figured out the logistics of that yet, but it's something that I've been kind of thinking about a lot.
Yeah, I think if we're going to like move on to something else or like longer form work or whatever, yeah, I think we'd probably do zines first, just because I think zines are really, they kind of fit the aesthetic of the site and you could do a lot of cool things with them. And then, at the end of the day, I mean, look, publishing physical books is a huge money suck. And, I just don't think, that's in the cards for now. I think, we just kind of want to stick to, being that kind of computer writing.
Do you have, either of you, any interest with like different delivery methods? I guess you kind of got into that a little bit talking about like zines, but doing like, I don't know, email newsletters or I don't know, just like something online that is beyond somehow a web page, if that makes any sense.
I don't know. We haven't really kind of talked about stuff like that. I think Surfaces benefits from not being intrusive at all. I think, it kind of just being like this black and white, stark looking website makes quite the statement. So yeah, I don't know if we really want to start getting into like alternate like content delivery systems and things like that. I think the between the Twitter and the site itself, I think we've kind of established, what it is we do.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that like the simplicity helps it a lot. Just like, because I am interested in doing like different things with it, publishing different formats and stuff like that, or different mediums. I mean, it's just that right now, I think the simplicity of the site is to its benefit. Though I have been kind of on my own like side projects, I've been kind of interested in like what, like, for example, what Twitter specifically brings to the table as like content delivery. I've been working on like this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it, like a text let's play that's like basically me playing through a video game and like doing weird like just stylistic writing alongside it while I just post the picture, like the captions and the pictures on Twitter. But like in terms of surfaces specifically, I think right now we're just kind of going with the simple approach overall.
I like that. I think it's good to know, or to have a clear sort of goal of where you stand. It seems to me that a lot of the lit mags that I've encountered seem to feel like there's a natural progression where it's almost like the progression of a writer these days, or someone who wants to make a living being a writer, where it's you get published a bunch in some lit mags, and then you go and you publish a novel at a small press, and then a slightly bigger press, and then so on and so on and so on. And it seems like the online publishing world does that too, where they publish a bunch of one shots, and then they publish a collection, and then they say, okay, now we're going to do 2 books a year, and then 6 books a year. So it is nice to kind of know exactly what something is and not feel like it's building toward being something else once it has the right amount of resources.
Yeah, and I feel like our current direction with the site, where it's pretty much just like no bios, no like big promotion or anything like on the website itself, and keeping it simple and not doing books and stuff like that, I think it helps lend itself to that demographic that we're kind of trying to reach, where we're not just the typical literature magazine and people who don't like submit anywhere, don't write a whole lot, or just totally unknown and stuff, feel comfortable submitting to us. Like, for example, I feel like if we were to take bios, I think that it would make, even if we didn't require them, it would make people who want to submit anonymously or pseudonymously less likely to submit to us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, once you start doing like the whole bio thing, it becomes like a credentials arm race. And, we're just completely not about that. I mean, something I really love about Surfaces is that we've been able to publish a lot of first-time writers, and that's like super important to us. So, if someone feels bad, like sending in a bio that says like, this is so-and-so's first story or nothing at all. Like, I don't want to ever make someone feel like they're not good enough yet to submit to Surfaces, because that's definitely not the case.
I feel too like my big problem with, I guess, that natural progression of like indie literature, where eventually you start publishing books and you're like looking to get, is that I don't want us to ever feel like we have to like publish somebody, or we should take someone's work because like, well, it would sell copies or whatever.
Yeah.
Writing that like compels me like and fits with the site. Like I can't, I could never bring myself to think in the way where like I want to take this person's writing, not only because it's good, but also because like they'll get people to pay attention to us or whatever.
Yeah, totally. We kind of got lucky because like when Surfaces first launched, it launched with like some, well-known names. Like I think Sean Kilpatrick was like one of the first pieces up there.
Yeah.
Like we get people that people know. So like, it's not like, it's never been like we had to grow into it. Like, we were already getting people, that already have an audience. So, it's a nice mix of established names and total newcomers. And I think that's what works for its benefit.
Yeah, and I find as a casual reader of online literature that there are at any time only like 5 names that I'm kind of familiar with anyway. So it becomes sort of disingenuous to your mission to, try to get the people who you've built an aesthetic for.
I've actually talked to another writer about this, but this is part of why like the bios specifically are like the thing is with them is that they almost feel, I get why websites do them, and they also do allow a writer to like, I guess, sell themselves, but I find that whole angle just kind of insidious and dark a little bit. Like the fact that writers have to sell themselves at all, and the fact that like I've heard before that there are writers that will get accepted for a publication just because of their cover letter and stuff and stuff like that. It's just, I have no patience for it. It just makes me feel kind of ill. I don't have any time for it.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, for the listeners at home, if you send a cover letter to us, we will not read it. Like, we just don't read them.
It won't make us reject you or anything. Like, it will literally just play no part in the decision. We just won't read it.
Yeah.
It's nice to be able to focus on the writing as a person sending writing out. Well, and I find that the bios are almost an antiquated thing. Like, you don't need it. Like, so if I, really enjoy a piece by a person, if their name is there and they want to be found, it's pretty easy to find them.
Yeah, and that's why I'll still I'll promote people's Twitters and stuff on the account when I promote pieces. I just don't there's no real point to having a bio at the end of a Surfaces piece or whatever. It's just pointless, and it feels at best anachronistic, at worst a bit insidious, to demand that of people.
What is the relationship with your writers from the time you get their work to the time it ends up on the website?
Optimally, it's usually I tend not to edit a whole lot whenever I take in a piece. And I'm editing it and making the art for it and such. I tend to kind of just make sure whatever they have in it in terms of formatting is preserved, and there's no flagrant spelling errors or whatever. And I do try to talk to a lot of our writers, on Twitter especially. I'm very open to people DMing me or whatever. And some of the writers I've went back and forth on trying to make their piece more legible or whatever. And I tend to try and show them the art before and approve before it's posted. And while I don't do this with every one of our writers, I have tried to establish, I guess, a continuous correspondence with a lot of them where we just kind of DM about whatever along with the writing, because I do really, really appreciate all of our contributors, and I want them to feel, I guess, proud, and they the site, they have a little part of the site to their own now because one of their pieces is on there. Because that's how I felt when I first got my first submission accepted when I submitted last March, was that I felt proud to be in Surfaces in a way that no other literature magazine really has before.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, when I got my first Surfaces piece published, I felt like $1 million. And that's just because, I love the site. And, I and kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation, I think that kind of, again, we really want to foster the idea of a community. We want people to read it regularly, to feel that they're just kind of in that Surfaces orbit. I think that's so important to the site. So that's why, everyone that contributes to the site, more or less, we're pretty friendly with, afterwards, because, we're kind of sharing that vision.
That's not something I've experienced. I like to hear it. Love to hear it. It's interesting, the literary magazines that are out there that talk about building community, fostering community, and things like that, and seeing how they go about doing that. And we've sort of danced around it a little bit, and it seems like that's something that's important to you. I don't know. I don't even know if, aside from keeping in contact with your writers and promoting their stuff, if there's anything more you can do, really.
I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I think it's really just a matter of just staying in contact with people and just keeping people feeling like they're included.
Yeah, I think that's also how we've kind of gotten something that really, like, the only other sites like that seem like where this is a thing that matters or a thing that people even care about are like expat and misery tourism. We have a lot of serial contributors that have like contributed to us multiple times, or for a while for me, like I was only sending my new stuff into Surfaces. Like that's all I did for a few months, was whenever I made something really good, I'd submit it to Surfaces. And I feel like that's something that's kind of, I don't know, missing from other literature magazines, which kind of makes sense because a lot of them are a lot bigger and like get a lot of work and such. They can't really have that like serial contributor like angle, or if they do, it's not really as emphasized. But at Surfaces, like I have people like I don't know how to pronounce her name out loud, but she was credited as TX Jen. And she wrote like some prose poetry for us. And she's already talking about like submitting something else, like given enough time. And that's something that I just feel like I haven't really seen from a lot of other places that publish a lot more, or just have like a revolving door of people that are like constantly new faces coming to them.
Yeah, I would say like, you know, what's really cool about Surfaces is that like we're not just like a box to check for people. It's like, oh, okay, you know, I hit a lit site of this size, now I got to try to get it published in a lit mag of this size, and you know that climb up until you know you're like in Granta or something, and you know it's like a loyalty thing. Like people genuinely love the site, and once they're published once, they want to be back because it's really just about like wanting to just be part of that site.
I will say that I've seen the serial contributor thing discouraged in a couple places, which was always like, I guess I get it to some degree, especially if you're, you know, sort of promoting yourself as a place for newer writers and you have limited space because you only do however many pieces a month or whatever. But yeah, it always sort of made me feel strange. Like, okay, well, I'm going to feel bad submitting here again if you take my piece. So I guess I just won't. And maybe that's just my own anxiety or whatever.
I think that, like, I get that because I've felt that before too, where, like, you see the sites that say, like, oh, if you have been accepted here, like, don't submit for X amount of time, which I get, like, I understand it. And, like, it's not something I'm particularly, like, strongly against other sites doing it. It's just not something I'm interested in because, I feel like part of what helps bolster the idea that Surfaces has like an actual like aesthetic to it and isn't just a generic literature magazine is the fact that we have people that submit to us more than once that like we pretty much are always like really into the work of. Like I think it helps develop, I guess, what we put in the submission page as new literary terrain. Like I think that you can pave that by having people that kind of align with you aesthetically contributing more than once. And I think that also helps build community in a way that just having constantly new faces coming in can't really do. Yeah, instead of just sending out like mass retweets and things like that. Well, then that helps too, because if you're trying to develop an aesthetic and you have people who get it, it helps to, you know, incubate those ideas by having them put those ideas on display in the same place as much as they have those ideas. So going from there, I wonder sort of like what the goal of Surfaces is, if you have a goal. And maybe we've sort of like hinted at it already, but it'd be nice to maybe put it out there, I guess.
I think if we have a goal, it's really just to kind of create, the scene that we want to be a part of. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, Mika and I are both writers. We both have our tastes. We both know what we like, and we want to see more of it. So, like, by having a site where we can allow that to happen, and kind of just like, build the ranks, so to speak, of people who kind of like have similar tastes and like want to see more of the same things. I think that's really just what we're trying to do with it.
Yeah, it like, honestly, I guess our goal, which in a way is we've kind of succeeded, but it's something that's, always developing too, is create our own little scene around the website, our own little like group of people that love contributing to it or reading it or just know about it. That from which, like, new art, for example, like, I get so excited whenever like writers that contributed to us early on in their, like, I guess, writing career or whatever, or were basically unknown before contributing to us, go on to do bigger and better things, or go on to like do their own thing or whatever. Like I was so ecstatic to see when all of the expat books were announced that, like, 4 out of the 5 people, including Anthony, that are getting books published by expat are serial Surfaces contributors. That's really exciting. Like, I love that. And like, there's people that have contributed to us that have went on to make like their own like little literature magazine or like zine or whatever. I know a couple of contributors that are like, or like future contributors that are going to be doing their own literature mag at some point. Like, that kind of stuff is the really exciting thing to me, is and like what I see as kind of our goal overall is just building this scene and making it expand, and like just seeing what comes out of it, really.
This has been an interesting experience, either one, both, for me, just because it seems not often that editors, long form sort of talk about what it is that they're doing. And it's an interesting thing for me as a person who really doesn't want to do it, but understands that I need it. Yeah,
it's like a lot of literature magazines, you don't really have a good sense of like what, unless their aesthetic is extremely pure and like distilled, like Tragical Books, for example, like it's website just oozes style, and you kind of get a feel for what it wants like really quickly. But like a lot of mags, like, you kind of just have to guess that they'll take most things maybe that aren't genre fiction, I guess, like but I really like doing things like this or talking on the Twitter account about the website a lot, because I desperately want people to understand what I'm like putting down. I want people to understand, and I think it's exciting whenever we get work that shows that people are understanding what I'm trying to put out there, what me and Anthony are trying to put out there together about this site, and trying to convey with it.